I have recently read and posted reviews of two other Julian Barnes novels. One of them was A Sense of an Ending, and the other one was A History of the World in 10 and a Half Chapters, both of which I really, really liked. This book, this is called Metroland. This is Julian Barnes' first novel, published in 1980, and that's the novel I want to review for you now. Metroland reflects on some of the same themes that you see, especially in A Sense of an Ending. You see the obnoxiousness of young schoolboys who have read a few important books, but not nearly enough of them. Growing up, love, memory, things like that. This being my third book by Barnes, I'm starting to get a feel for his authorial panache, and I can't help being charmed by it. I really love all of his books. You get the sense that he's always writing with a bit of a gentle smirk on his face, not unlike the one he always has on display on the back covers of his books. This story follows the narrator named Chris and his best friend from school, Tony, as they grow up in the suburbs of London, which he calls Metroland. They both hate ordinary people. They're very pretentious and silly about it. They call people, they almost use the word as a weapon. They call them bourgeois. They profess to live for art and ideas when it's really just a kind of self-important high-mindedness that they're putting on and trying to convince themselves of. Part 2, that's part 1. There are 3 parts. Part 2 sees Chris moving to Paris and getting a little distant from Tony. While there, he meets and falls in love with a French woman named Annick and befriends 3 fellow art lovers, one of whom is a woman named Marion, while he's visiting the Musée Gustave Moreau. And one day he mentions to Annick rather heavy-handedly that he met Marion, with whom he's really done nothing more than innocently flirt with a little bit. But she gets really upset, she leaves him, and you never hear from her again. And here is where Barnes's wonderful sort of infatuation with irony comes to a head. He falls in love with Marion. He has a child with her. He takes on a mortgage and a very respectable job, which he actually enjoys. And he turns into one of those hideous bourgeoisie that he hated as a boy, and that Tony still hates. However, he's an adult now, and he's come to find out that living a middle-class life can be full of the same happinesses and stresses and joys and anxieties that even the life of an artist has. For a rough comparison, imagine 2 Holden Caulfields, Chris and Tony, except that Chris actually manages to make some moral and intellectual progress and crawl out of his teenage funk during the course of the novel. Tony, unfortunately, doesn't, and at the end of the novel is bitter that his writing hasn't proven more successful than it is. Being a successful human being helps first, though, which is a lesson that Chris has learned and Tony hasn't, by hook or by crook. As I mentioned earlier, this novel was published in 1980, and it resembles what you would expect from Barnes then, the author sort of finding his voice as a novelist, a voice that still resonates in his later fiction, philosophical but not overbearing, witty but not caustic. For a debut novel, I thought it was very impressive. I didn't find it as wonderful as some of the later stuff. For example, A History of the World in 10 and a Half Chapters is still my favorite of the 3 that I've read by him, but it's definitely worth checking out if you enjoy his other work. And just one more thing to tell you, this was another novel that I got from the basement of the library, as you can tell by the shiny cover there. So, something to check out if you love Julian Barnes. Metroland by Julian Barnes.